In the last episode we learned how to use arcade scenes, and we created this game scene, and also we have added scene switching functionality. So if I run the program and if I press the N key, it just switches between these levels or scenes. My problem with this is that it switches immediately. There is no transition between two levels, so there is no scene transition. And in this episode what we are going to do is add a very simple fade in effect. So when we switch from one scene to the next scene, it will transition using a fade in effect. I was searching in the documentation if there is a proper way to do scene transitioning in arcade, but there is nothing about this in the documentation. The only thing I found is actually, let me go to the documentation. So if you type here transitions, you will find this one, fade in and out of views. So this shows you how to do transitions, so fade in and fade out transitions between arcade views. But I want to use scene transitions, not view transitions. So let's go back, and based on this code I created the scene transition, so not the view transition. Okay, let's go back to the game scene class, and here I'm just going to add one global constant, and I'm just going to call it fade rate, and I'm going to set its value to 2. Also in the game scene class I'm going to add one more property, and this will be the self.fadeIn, and this will start at 255. And technically we are going to draw a big rectangle over the scene, and this rectangle's transparency will be decreased over time. And now let's add the update fade function or method. So update fade, and here in this one I'm just going to ask if self.fade is not set to none. So if self.fade is not none, I'm just going to decrease its value, so self.fade in minus equals the fade rate, which is set to 2. And if this is less than or equal to 0, I'm just going to set the fade in value to none. So this will run every time when we instantiate a new game scene. And the next method I'm just going to add to this game scene class is the draw fading. So draw fading, and here we are also going to ask if the fade in value is not set to none, so fade in is not none. I'm just going to draw an arcade field rectangle here. So arcade.draw rectangle field and arcade.xywh, so this will draw a rectangle in the xy position and the width and height. So the x value will be window width divided by 2, the y value will be set to window height divided by 2, and the width will be window.width and the height will be window.height for this rectangle. And its color will be set to 0, 0, 0, and its transparency, so red, green, blue, and its transparency is set to fade in. And this fade in will be decreased. Okay, the next thing to do is use these two methods in the draw and the update method. So let's update the fade. So just call here the self.updateFade, and also here in the draw method just call the self.drawFading. And as you can see now we have already a fading effect. So let's go to the next scene, and it slowly gradually removes the black background and shows the scene. So we have just created a very simple fade in effect. Let me show you something here. So if I go to the draw fading and I set this rectangle to 255, and I'm just going to remove or comment out this line for a second, which updates the fade. Now as you can see we have just a big red rectangle, and if we update its fade or its transparency, it just slowly becomes transparent. Okay, so I'm just going to set this back to 0, and one more thing I'm just going to add to make it a little bit more interesting. I'm just going to add here, after here in the GameUV class, going to add the background sprite, so just creating a sprite list and creating a background sprite, and I will use this Starbase snow.jpg. I just downloaded it from Google, and this looks like this. Okay, so I'm just going to set its position to the center of the window and also set its alpha value to 100, so it is a little bit transparent, and adding this to the sprite list. And also don't forget to draw this sprite list in the onDraw method, but before the scene, so it will be in the background. And now if I run it, we have a nice background, and it also fades in. Of course, you can create also a fade out effect just by reversing this. So it will be, for example, you should add a cell that's fade out, and in that case the initial value will start with 0, and you will need to increase it to 255, and when it reaches 255 you should set the fade out value to none. So the opposite what we did here. So this was just a very simple example how you can do a very simple scene transition. But using shaders, you will be able to do much more better, visually much more appealing or interesting scene transitions. I'm going to do some research on these, and if I get to a good result, of course I'm going to show you in this series.